Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this PMOPA webinar, ADS-B versus XM weather, which is better? I'm your moderator, Rob Finfrock, the editor of PMOPA magazine, and today's presentation will be conducted by Monty Chicola, a longtime PMOPA member and a contributor to the magazine, and Monty's put together a fantastic presentation for everybody. Just a few notes, we are recording this webinar, and you will also have the chance to ask questions that will be answered at the end of the presentation. If you'd like to add those questions, click on the Q&A tab on your Zoom menu. Usually that's at the bottom of the screen. And type out your question, and I'll be taking a look at those, and we'll get those over to Monty following the presentation. Just one quick note, this webinar is presented for informational purposes only and may not reflect the experiences and or the opinions of PMOPA, its members, or sponsors. And with that, let's meet Monty. Monty is the president of Real Vision Software and a graduate of Northwestern State University, Louisiana, with degrees in computer science and accounting. He has owned 2 Piper aircraft. He currently flies a PA-46 350 Papa, and he's flies that all over the place from what I've talked about. We talked with Monty. He has over 4,000 hours of flying experience, approximately 2,500 of that in the PA-46. And like many of you, Monty is a firm believer in recurrent training, and I'm sure that'll probably pop up in the conversation at some point as well. And before we get to Monty, he asked to make one thing very clear. He is not a flight instructor. He's a pilot like all of you. And this is a conversation regarding the pros and cons of ADS-B weather versus XM, and perhaps more importantly, how those two systems can really work together to give pilots a more complete and accurate picture of the weather conditions around them when flying. So with that, Monty, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Rob. I appreciate it. Like Rob said, I am Monty Chicola, and I absolutely love my Mirage. And those of you who fly them or even the Meridian style planes, they do so much so well. To do that next upgrade, plane is going to cost you a ton. It is going to cost you a whole ton. And you sit there in the Mirage and you're doing 200 knots, you're in air conditioning comfort, you're in pressurization comfort, and you sit there and go, and you're burning about 20 gallons an hour, and you say to yourself, why would I need to upgrade this one more time? And it really just depends on the mission. But my Mirage actually ended up, I had the Lance and here for work. I'm the president of the company. So I traveled back in the old days for conferences and stuff. And I just really wanted something with the flight director. The straight tail Lance I had was like a 76 model, I think. And it didn't have a flight director, and it had a semi-good autopilot, nothing great. And I just really wanted the feeling of dual vacuum pumps, a little bit more stability on the autopilot. So that's why I originally upgraded to the Mirage. And I was going all the way up to North Dakota, South Dakota, and places where you really needed to reach out in a plane. So anyway, what I wanted to mention in my article here is it's based on weather. But the article originally started out because there's an EAA chapter just at this little airport just outside of my town that they asked me. So I'm flying a Mirage. They're flying these little small, some home built, some J3s, some, tail draggers of all kind. And they don't really do what I consider, serious world traveling into airports, right? So they're not used to filing IFR flight plans. They're not used to doing an arrival or a departure. And they said, Monty, would you mind taking one of your trips and document it from start to finish to how you actually filed the flight plan, how you really flew it, what was the real weather, and that kind of stuff through the whole thing, and tell us what it's like to fly, real airplanes into real airports. So this happened to be a trip to Orlando with my to catch up with my grandkids to go to Disney World for a few days. So it's a very important trip. Everybody knows that if you're going to see your grandkids. So I did a pre-flight, and I looked, and the weather was going to be a little questionable going into it. I went from Alexandria, that's AEX, that's my home base, to Pensacola, and then from Pensacola I was going on down to Kissimmee and outside of Orlando. So to do this trip in my Mirage, that first picture you see is actually my panel. I know it's a wood grain panel Mirage. So everybody's got a wood grain panel, raise their hand. There's one. That's the one. That's the only one. The guy that made the wood grain panels had done it in a Malibu, a regular Malibu one time, and then he did this one, and then the guy went out of business. So there's not a lot of wood grain panel Mirages out there. But my Lance had the best wood grain panel in the world, and I just tried to duplicate it. So that's how that ended up. But anyway, so in my Mirage, I have a pair of 275s, GI 275s that I had bought. To give me, you know, it really, to me, honestly, really is a good thing to have a digital attitude indicator, period. You know, we've all seen too many crashes. I've probably gone through, I'd say at least 3 times where my vacuum pump had messed up and my attitude indicator had gone south, and I ended up having to fly off either the right side instrument or it's VFR, just blow it off and fly the plane, you know, VFR. But the truth is, I really have a lot of faith in these digital gauges. They really seem to be solid. So, so my plane today has a GNX 375, and for my weather and stuff, I use an MX 200. So there's probably nobody else on this call that's got exactly the same setup as I do, but it really doesn't matter. It's really down to what does the weather give me, and what is really, you get to decide what you think is the best or not. But when I did this flight, I didn't have the 375 yet. It got put in after this flight. So at the time I was using, ForeFlight has these little card looking things that you plug it into a USB port and you stick it in your window. And that's what I had here. At the time I did this for my ADS-B that would talk to my ForeFlight on my iPad, but now my 375 got rid of that and I gave it away to a student pilot. So they're really nice piece of equipment, actually. So the trip turned out to be an instrument trip where actually when I left out of Alexandria, I ended up having to shoot an approach. We'll see it in a second, in the Pensacola down to 500. I actually shot an approach yesterday down to 500. And it's really a good trip to do that. So during this trip, I used ADS-B and I used my XM weather on board. And let's just kind of take the trip and talk about it. So you can flip that, Rob, if you don't mind. Y'all are open for questions. So you're not going to stump the band. I'm not trying to tell you I'm smarter than you, not as smart as you. It's really an idea of, I want you to learn how you do it, learn how maybe I did it, and let's get the best decisions of what's the safest thing to be. That's the whole bottom line about the whole thing about PMOPA is really, we want everybody flying our planes to be the absolute safest, period, that they can be out there. And that's hopefully what we're going to try to get out of this. It was a perfect day, in my opinion, on this flight for an instrument pilot, just like yesterday. Yesterday, the tops were at 3,000, exactly like this day was. The bases were 500. It was the good stuff. It wasn't the thunderstorms and lightning everywhere. It was the good clouds that don't hurt you. They may bounce a little bit, but you're comfortable in them. You're hand flying the plane. You're getting currency. It's just a wonderful day to do it. So I took this approach. This was going into Pensacola at 500 overcast, and that was me on top. I know I flew over at 13,000. So this is me coming down out of 13,000. They had that one little ridge of clouds to go down through, and then I was going to be on the approach for the 500. You can flip it, Rob. So I got into there and shot the approach. On the original article, I had a picture of the instrument panel going into that, which y'all already understand how to shoot approaches. But I did that for the EAA group that's not used to understanding what the instrumentation is telling us. So I checked the weather, and the weather just had solid rain out over the Gulf. So I just took on full fuel, which everybody knows is going to give me about 5 hours worth of fuel. This is really about an hour and 40-minute trip to between an hour and 40 and less than 2 hours down over the normal route. And the normal route I would take from Pensacola, Florida, if you know that route, you normally go like over Cross City and then Cross City on down to down south from there, and just try to stay I try to stay as close as I can to the land side. I don't really like to jump out over the Gulf on a single engine airplane. I just don't. My 7 minutes worth of flying time is just not worth me risking calling that I'm swimming in the Gulf. So I just drag along the coastline as best I can on a flight plan. So I decided to get full fuel to go around it, and then I took off. So we can go, Rob. All right, so this is really what the weather looked like. Now, there was ice up there, so I really stayed down. The other thing about weather planning, you try to do as much as you can on the ground. And the first thing I always do on the ground is figure out, with ForeFlight, it'll tell you what the freezing levels are. And even when I'm climbing out in the airplane, I write down what the altitude was when I got to the freezing level. So if it's a clear day, yeah, I go up above it. If it's a rainy day like this, I'm going to stay below it. I'm just not going to mess around with ice. I've canceled a flight one time out of Pensacola going to South Florida because the whole state was covered with rain and I was picking up ice, and Monty's the plane may have been rated for it. Monty's nerves weren't rated for it. And I ended up turning it around and going back to Pensacola and landed. But I always try to get the freezing level. So at this point, I think the freezing level was either 12,000 or something. So I just filed 8,000, stay below the cloud level, and just ride on through the light rain and let her rip, but don't worry about freezing up. So you've taken away the big problem. Nobody can help you in freezing up, okay? In freezing up, it's like declaring an emergency. They'll say, go where you want to go, do what you need to do, you want to climb, you want to do. But the bottom line is nobody can help you other than yourself in frozen ice. You're fighting an uphill battle and maybe dying. So I don't mess around with ice. It's just, I'm not doing it. So as I was doing my flight plan, and this is what it looked like on my MX200, and I have a picture later on that I'll show you what it looked like on the iPad. The MX200 XM weather on the MX200 to me is accurate as accurate gets. I literally can take my right wing on this green section and go put my right wing in the green and look out on the right wing and see it raining on the right wing. I really feel it's that accurate. So I use XM to truly fly the airplane. That's when I'm flying the airplane by. I've got my navigation on it, and that's really what it is. So I was going out past the normal cross city, and then I picked this intersection to take a right-hand turn to go south. Now, that's, if you think about Florida, I'm actually flying west to east on that purple line, and then I'm dead south on the other line. That kind of gives you an idea what the deal was. So I was at 8,000 feet, and I could see the buildups out there, which was great, but everything you could see out the window, when it matches what you see on your instrumentation, it gives you that warm, fuzzy feeling of continuing on. And with that picture right there, if things really get tight, take a left, right? Get the heck away from it, take a left. If it's too bouncy or it's raining harder than you thought, taking a left, you're going to be able to get out of it. And you could go ahead. Okay, so as I was flying through that, this is where I finally got to Kissimmee, and this is where it really got bouncy. So if you're thinking about the front end of the front is where you really get the high winds and the stuff. So you could be behind the storm and flying in the rain and be actually smooth and comfortable, but in the front of the storm where it's actually building up and doing its thing for a thunderstorm, it's where you get the high winds and stuff. So as I was breaking down out of here, getting ready to go land in Kissimmee, it really got seriously bouncy to where I slowed the plane down, was holding on right till you wheel tight and just making sure you don't bump your head on the roof. It was really the toughest time. So I broke out of the clouds and went down, and they were wanting me it was VFR to the runway. And I mean, it's beating you to death. You're trying to find the runway and go in and land. And the funny part about this flight was when I finally got on the ground, the line crew guy comes running out there in his little golf cart and said, hurry up. Do y'all need to get bags out of there? It's getting ready to rain. Rain's coming. I'm like, I've been flying in rain for 2 hours, buddy. Get off of me. What the heck? Like, no kidding. It's going to rain. So that's what the breakout finally looked like going into it. It was kind of a stormy landing and high winds. Go ahead, Rob. So I was going to try to put together some pros and cons of what I feel is the good stuff and the bad stuff between ADS-B, and they both have pros and they both have cons. So the first thing for me is, like I said, I'm using an MX200. It used to be an MX20. I had to actually upgrade it because the MX20 finally got worn out. But I really like the feeling of a panel mounted device, period. I've been in bumpy weather. I've been, just recently coming out of Dallas where you're trying to push buttons on like the new 375 and it's bouncing so much that you really can't get things done. The panel mount stuff to me, like the MX200, I can actually grab the knob and now I know where my finger's at so I don't mess up on anything. So I really like the idea that, number one, it's got its own power. It's not going to die on me. And number two, that, you know, if I really need to grab it, I can grab it. Another thing I will say later on in the discussion is that I like the idea of having it up in my face. So just to the left of this is my instrumentation, right? So my 275s are just to the left of this. So I'm literally moving my eyes left to right, not looking down in my lap as I would be with the iPad. So I've never been disoriented and had a problem of that ever that I can remember in my flying, but the up and down of your head can really add to the bumpiness and the possibility of disorienting yourself. So it's just something I like. I do like the contrast on the MX200 better than on the iPad. I like the little lightning bolts, you know, that's where you don't want to go, right? For sure, right? And as you see there, I'm trying to cut between those storms. But the good thing is, remember, I'm at 8,000 feet, all right? This is showing you all the weather. But the weather at 8,000 feet as I'm looking out the window really matches what I see on the screen. So I see the buildup coming up off to the left. I see the openings off to the right. So I feel confident to keep going forward, right? If it didn't match or the latency was too bad, then I would probably bail and go find somewhere to sit down. But it feeling good that everything's working out right sounds good. And like I said, I do like the lightning bolts because that tells you where the thunderstorms are. And that's where, you know, my theory is that if Scott Crossfield couldn't fly through thunderstorms, Monty has no idea, no business flying through a thunderstorm whatsoever. And on my MX200, I can set like winds aloft, which is great. I can also set cloud tops so I can see where the actual tops of the clouds are, which I really think is great, especially if you're going to be doing some night flying and the weather's out there. So you can go ahead and change it. So the pros with the XM weather is I can set the winds aloft. To me, the latency, if I'm not mistaken, is like 3 minutes, but it tells you that. So if you can see that screen that he's showing right there, it gives you those times down at the bottom. It tells you when was the last time it actually did an update. So you'll see when it actually does a refresh. So if you're really trying to see how old this weather is, and I'm cheating. So if you look at where my plane is right there, I know the weather's moving right to left. Okay, I know that. So if I'm going to cheat, then I'm going to cheat a little to the left, right? So I want to move over a little and just shoot the gap because I know that what's coming to me is coming right to left. So I know how to do that. So I can pick a waypoint around the storm as I go through. And then as I change the actual, let's say I need to pick another identifier. So I want to move my course because let's say it's too rough or whatever, and I want to go to the right. I can just tell approach, hey, look, I want to go direct to here, and it'll put my navigation on the weather map so I can see where I'm going. And then to zoom in and out, I literally just grab that right knob and I can zoom in and out on the picture if I need to get in closer as I'm getting closer to things. Okay. You can change that, Rob. So now the cons on my XM weather. Number one is the cost. It should be at the top. I guess I didn't put that on the thing. It cost me roughly $800 a year. I know when I first bought the Mirage, it had GDL 69 in it, but it was displaying it on the 530, which was that square looking, you know, depiction of weather. So it was a square yellow and a square green, and it's really not good. So I bought the MX200 because I wanted electronic charts, which was nice, and I wanted the weather on here. And now that I've got the 375, I have a whole page for traffic, and I love that traffic page. I go into Dallas a good bit. I went into Fort Worth the other day. When you're really, or Destin, I was in Destin 2 weeks ago. When you're really going somewhere, you know, with a lot of traffic, you can zoom in on like a 5 mile range or a 7.5 mile range, and you got the whole screen. And you can actually push the select button. It'll select each airplane and tell you their altitude and how fast they're going. So you can figure out. I had a Mirage last week when I was going into Destin, and I know the guy's out of Baton Rouge, and he is literally coming out of 17.5 right off my left wing. And I mean, we're both going into Destin side by side. I'm like, can't you like get away just a little bit, you know? But you could see him on, you know, on the traffic page. So I really, you know, one of the big pluses of ADSB is getting traffic. I just want to make sure you know that that's a big deal. So the course would change on that thing as I go ahead and change my course into 375. And the cost, like I said, that should be number one on the list is, do you really want to spend $800 for it? And it really just depends on what kind of flying you're doing. When I was flying for work, I'm going. You can check the weather all you want, but I'm committed to being in, this town at 7 o'clock that evening, which means I'm going. All right. Weather good, weather bad, weather not good, doesn't matter. We're going to land the plane over there. So if you're really serious about having to fly regardless, then you really want at least 2 copies of weather. To me would be a great option. I don't have radar. My plane wasn't built with radar. I don't know how to use radar. I've seen it I have a friend that flies a 350 King Air, but I don't know anything about it. So if you got radar and you wonder why I don't talk about the radar, is because Monty doesn't know anything about it. So don't let me mislead you. And from what I understand about radar is you got to know what you're doing to use it. So if you know what you're doing, it's great. If you don't know what you're doing, you're just messing up. So like I've said before, I had an MX-20. I went to an MX-200 just because it was worn out. And the avionics shop still like, you still got a 200? I'm like, that is a great piece of equipment. It's big. It's easy to use. It works every time. I know how to get through the pages. I have my charts on it. It'll put the charts. So like yesterday when I was shooting that approach, I can put my chart up on there. It puts the plane on the chart. I mean, if you get lost with that, it's kind of your fault at that point. You can change it, Rob. So that's a picture that we probably should have put up sooner. That's my ForeFlight on my iPad. I have a mini iPad that I'll carry in the plane with me. So that's what that exact same weather that we looked at a minute ago looks like compared to it on XM. This is what it actually looks like on ADS-B on ForeFlight. Some of you may run Garmin Pilot or something like that. I'm just showing it because I use ForeFlight and have forever. So it really is good. So the number one benefits of ADS-B is the cost. So there is no subscription fee. The negative side on that is you got to have something to display it on, right? So you've got to have either, a panel mount that can take in your ADS-B and something to stream it there like I do with my 375, or you got to have one of those things you put in the window to get your ADS-B so you can stream it to your ForeFlight or whatever you want on your iPad. So there is a little cost to that. But once you get it, it really is exactly solid. So if I get a METAR on my ADS-B or I get a METAR on my MX-200, it's the same METAR, right? They change every hour on the hour and they're going to read exactly the same. So there's no real difference in that. I think the screen resolution on my iPad is better than my screen resolution on my MX-200. It makes sense. It's a whole lot newer device. And you can pinch and scroll and do your stuff as long as it's not too bouncy out there. You can get away with the iPad, and you can tie the iPad to your avionics. So you got your weather page right there, so you can use that. I set up ForeFlight, which I really do love. Is that, in ForeFlight, you can say, okay, depict the weather at every airport. So you'll see the green airports and the blue airports and it goes to like red. And then I think magenta is the last one for weather. So I was flying to Arkansas just the other day and I was actually flying to Missouri, but I was going to stop over in Hot Springs, Arkansas. And Hot Springs, Arkansas weather was 200 overcast and like a quarter of a mile. I'm like, no, I'm not stopping over in Hot Springs, Arkansas. I had plenty of fuel. It was just, was I going to need to go to the bathroom was the bottom line. I had people in the plane. But the good thing about, so number one, I canceled landing in Hot Springs and continued. I'd already filed on to Missouri. I can't think of the name of the town right off. But the nice thing about the iPad is you could put it in your lap and say, okay, if I start to get nervous about fuel, where do I need to run, right? Because you can take the iPad and look off to the left, which is where the good weather was, and you can see the green airports, right? And I wasn't going to be low on fuel, but you're just trying to stack the deck your way, right? That's what we're trying to do. So I can know where the VFR airports are, because I don't want to shoot an approach down to 700 feet, don't get in, and now be low on fuel and have to go find somewhere else. If I'm going to go low on fuel, I want to go to the closest VFR airport I got because I want to put it on the ground on the first time. So with the ForeFlight, I could scroll over and see where the green is, so I could see where the airports are all clear. So as I'm going on farther to Missouri, I always know an out to go jump over to a VFR airport to land. It's just great for that. You can't beat that. Like I said, the METARs are exactly the same, and I could get the same information on my 375 as I'm going to get everywhere else, which is fine. And I did mention that traffic is just a great thing to have as we fly into busy places. you know, you could tell them, they say, oh, I need you to turn 10 degrees left because you got traffic coming. And you could just scroll out and see what traffic they're talking about, right? You can see how close you're going to be. I love doing that stuff. I mean, I saw some C-130s the other day flying over to Destin. And it's really cool when they call out a plane and you realize, you know, that it's a C-130 and you get to watch it buzz by your window. It's really nice to see. It's really a cute thing. The 375 has a weather page. I did want to mention that, but it's that splotchy square, you know, depiction of weather. So like yesterday when I was going into Natchitoches, it was I looked over at the 375 and it's got a, you know, yellow blob out there, which just doesn't really make you feel too good. Okay, you can move on. The cons of it, ADS-B weather is good, but you are going to have something to display it on. So it's not totally free, right? You got to come up with something to display it on. And most of us have something like an iPad or even your iPhone, and you can get it put on there depending on what you have to display it. So it may be something like the little thing I had from ForeFlight that you're going to plug in, or it may just be that you have a panel mount that'll talk to it. So you have to have a display for it. The display on the 375 I mentioned to you, it is splotchy, it's square. I haven't used a 650 or a 750. I've seen them. I've been in planes that had them. I haven't ever really been in planes that had weather that really showed me exactly what it does. I assume it's a lot better resolution than what they had in the old days. I mean, in theory, that the technology should be a lot better than that. So if you run 375, I'm sorry, if you run 750s, and that's great for your weather page, great. I don't mean to display that. I just want you to know that I just don't get to fly that. You know, and like I said, on the ADS-B, if you're using something like a ForeFlight, Monty doesn't like the having to plug it in. I did put a USB port in my plane when I put the 275s in, so I can plug into that. So like if I want to charge my iPad or something while I'm in flight, I can do that. But the next bullet is to my heart is wires. I just have this phobia about a wire getting wrapped around something and me can't control the wheel. What a stupid phobia it is, what a little bitty wire. I don't care. It's just a phobia I have of having a wire going across the airplane. So I actually mounted my USB on the left-hand side right next to the window where I had my ForeFlight plugged into the window there. I'm the guy that had the window blow up. So that day I happened to have had the ForeFlight plugged in there. When I don't know if y'all saw the article that I wrote for the magazine where my left side window at 15,000 decided to explode and leave. But that day I just happened not to put that little ForeFlight thing in there. And then it's hard to change the screen on bumpy days. So if you're using a little iPad or something and you're trying to touch stuff and it's just hard to touch it and drive and look at the plane all at the same time, it gets a little tough. And I think panel mounts are a little easier on that. Okay, Rob. And it really, this is kind of my wrap up, that it's, you know, it's your decision as to which one you think is better for yourself for flying. Like I said, a man with two watches, does he really know what time it is? I think somebody with two weather depictions, and I always do that. I look at what is Mr. XM showing me? What is Mr. ADS-B showing? Hey, they're in pretty good harmony. So that probably is the yellow stuff and that probably is the red stuff. So we probably don't want to go that way. To me, that's a good decision, right? You don't want to be that part, you know, you don't know how bad weather is until you actually get in it. But what you don't want to do is get in it and then realize, hey, it's a lot worse than I want it to be. And I sure wish I wasn't in it. Now I got to figure out how to get out of it, right? You want to stack the deck to use the weather so you stay safe and away from it. If it takes you another 5 or 10 or 15 minutes to fly around it and you're comfortable and you're safe and you got plenty of fuel for it, why not, right? Why not? But, you know, some people want to get there as quick as they can, and that's fine. And it's always nice to have a backup. So if you've got all your weather on your ForeFlight, on your lap, and your iPad got overheated and decided it don't want to work no more, or your battery decided it wanted to die and you can't get it plugged up to heat it up, then you don't have a real good backup. So you always want to come up with a way that if things go south, I'm a software guy. I own an imaging company, which means everything in the world's supposed to be digital, right? When I fly, I have charts for approaches on my MX200. I have charts for approaches on my iPad, and I print out a copy of every airport I'm going to be landing at that day. So I'm getting ready to fly to Oklahoma on Friday to Broken Bow, and I just printed out the approach plate for Broken Bow. Now, I know I have it on the other two devices, but a third backup, I like it being in my lap. I shot that approach down to minimums last time I went in a broken bow. Having that backup, if that's what makes you comfortable in the cockpit, do it. Because that's what you want to be, is comfortable in the cockpit, right? You want to have everything stacked your way. So that's just my 2 cents worth on that. What's the next slide? Oh, questions. I like that part. I saw y'all had put some in there. Let me look at the first one. Where I say about XM radar actually has a lag. ADS-B radar. It should only be used for. I agree with you 200%. The question was about it should only be used for strategic planning. That's exactly right. That's my opinion and your opinion. Decision making, strategic planning. Do I want to go? How bad does it look? When I get up there, it's going to change. Weather's going to change, and I agree with you 200%. If Scott Crossfield couldn't fly through a thunderstorm, Monty Shikola has no business trying to fly through a thunderstorm. I consider he was the best pilot that ever been born. So I agree with you 200%. It should be used for decision making out there, not inside the weather. That pictures I was showing you on that's probably as close as I've ever done as dividing weather. It just so happened that at 8,000 feet, it was a good day that I could see clearly through the weather. There were a few times when I actually did have weather pouring down on the window, but it was smooth, it was easy, and I wasn't in any serious, felt like I was in any danger. But the first question, Mr. Josh says, and I agree, weather on board should be used for strategic planning to stay away from weather, not to be driving through it and using it like radar. That's what radar is designed to do. From what I understand, I don't fly radar, so I can't answer it any better than that, of how much better it is. The next one, do I do this type of IMC or always VMC? I do fly IMC at times. I enjoy it, not on purpose. I like to have the weather where I can jump up, hit it at 3,000, climb out on top at 4, 5, 6,000. I've done it to where I've climbed out at 10,000. It does give you a good feeling of gratitude to be able to fly IMC. I feel like the Malibu does good. You check everything out on your instrument, as you're taxiing out. Then when you take off, you check everything to make sure that the instrumentation all seems to be working good. At any time in a part of the flight that you feel like the plane's not up to speed or you're not up to speed, then go to your alternate, figure out what you want to do to get away from it. But, I will fly IMC. I did just yesterday. Yesterday's decision was, hey, I could drive an hour up the street or I could go shoot a 500 approach. I haven't shot a 500 approach in a while. I'm by myself on the plane. It's a really good day for it. It's easy clouds, good clouds. Let's do it. And I really felt great about it. So it's a personal preference. I'll tell people, you pre-flight the person before the pilot, before you pre-flight the plane. If you're not up to it, don't do it. If you feel like it's something you want to do and you're excited about it and you're comfortable and you got a good night's sleep and you want to do it, do it. That's why you got your instrument rating. If it's beyond what you want, my personal minimums is 1,000 feet. So if somewhere I'm going is less than 1,000 feet, I question myself as to, do I want to do it? I question myself as to, am I up to speed? Am I good to go? And then my last question is the plane good to go? When you go to pre-flight it solid as a rock. Check your gas, check your oil, check everything out. Check your instruments on taxiing out. Is it ready to go? I'm ready to go, and let's do it. Next thing, it says, I would not recommend flying like you're advocating IMC, period. The latency. Okay, and I agree with you. I agree with you 200%. It is older latency on the weather. But if it's sparse weather, like yesterday when I flew back from Natchitoches, it had thunderstorms out there. But the thunderstorms were probably, 50 miles, 100 miles apart. They were solid lines, but they were way apart from where I was going to be flying. So I agree with you. Don't let me sound like I'm trying to tell you, go jump off in the weather. It's no big deal. It is a huge, big deal. And like I said, you don't know until you get into it, whether it's a simple little deal like yesterday, I'm just bouncing through the clouds and easing on down and shooting the approach, or is it, I got my hands full, it's like a gorilla's got the tail and it's rattling me everywhere. And you really don't like that. I've been there once. I don't like it. So I know if the winds are high and I know if it's bad weather, I'm man enough to say I'm not going. I had another trip to Orlando with some friends from Georgia, and on Sunday, the whole state was covered with thunderstorms. And I said, we're not going. They said, what do you mean we're not going? We got to work tomorrow. I said, you need to be home, get in your car and start driving. But this plane ain't taking off that ground today with me as pilot. You got to be man enough to say no, period. And it's a tough decision. It's the hardest decision as a pilot has to make, in my opinion.
Monty, I'd like to interrupt, building on David's question and the question about minimums and latency. Can you explain a bit more the difference, if there's any difference in latency between ADS-B and XM, and what is your experience with the length of latency between the two platforms?
You know, if you plan on, the good thing about the MX200 is it actually does show me when the refresh did happen. So I'll get an update that I just got a refresh. It tells me the time on that. So I can determine that it's 2 minutes old because it tells me when it just got the update. I don't think in ForeFlight or ADS-B, they actually give you that countdown. I may be wrong, but I don't know of that. So exactly what he said. I would expect that it's about a 10 minutes latency, and a 10-minute can be a big deal. The storms can grow, the storm can shrink, the storms will move. They're not sitting still. But the latency of a minimum of 5 to 10 minutes is true. And you're right. Don't use it for actual depiction of I'm going to now strategically go through these storms or around these storms. If you can't see where that buildup is, and once we all know you, once you get into IMC, you're in IMC, you don't really know where the big stuff is because you're just driving in the clouds. You want to know that way out there before you get to the stuff as to what you're getting ready to go get into. But the latency of about 10 minutes is a good number, and it's still not a perfect science, right? You know, how many of us have ever shot approaches where they're calling it 1200 overcast, and you get there and when the tower says, hey, can you give us a basis report? That tells you they don't know what the bases are, right? But you know, my weather said it was going to be 1200 overcast. I can shoot 1200 all day long, but now I'm, you know, strapped in to shoot an approach down to the bottoms, and yeah, I've already got my alternate plan. Monty is not one. I'll tell you one thing I do hate, absolutely hate, is when I look in like my IFR magazines and stuff, and okay, he was on his 6th attempt of shooting this approach, and I'm thinking to myself, you know how wore out you are, how mentally tired you are, how low on fuel you are, shooting 6 approaches into the same airport trying to get, you've got to be out of your daggum mind. And, you know, I'm going to stack the deck like yesterday. I went to the initial approach fix. I'm not cutting it short. I'm on exactly the right altitude. I'm shooting exactly down the line. I've got exactly my needles lined up. And come 500, my hand's going to be on the throttle ready to go around, period. And not go around to shoot the approach again. I'm coming back home. It was a 10-minute flight. I'd have just turned around and came back to the house. So you want to have the deck stacked as you know what you're going to do and which way you need to run after that first approach, because I'm going to give it the best I've got on the first time. But I hate looking in my magazine whenever they were just 4 times they tried it, and on their 5th time they crashed. I'm like, well, yeah, they were wore ass out, you know, stupid. I hope that answered your question. We got another one from Matt. He has a Meridian, so I'm jealous at this point. He's got an Avidyne. I know what that is. XM, anyone else? To get the cloud tops to show up, it should be a button in there. I can, if you want to email me, I can send you what the button pushes are on my MX200 that you can compare. I've seen those Avidynes before used. So maybe if you send me an email, I'll get you a screenshot of how I get it on my machine. But there's 2 buttons on my machine on the MX200. One says cloud layers and cloud tops. So it tells you where the tallest tops are, and that's what will show up on the screen, so you know where the buildups actually are.
All right, that we're still open for questions, everybody. If you'd like to type in a question, feel free to do so. And while we're waiting to see if there are any more questions, Monty, if you could just kind of recap what we've discussed today and the benefits that you've experienced between XM and ADS-B, and what value have you gotten from utilizing both systems at once?
Right. So to me, like I said, it's an $800 a year investment to get XM for me. And I did put that in the article, is that you can buy a lesser subscription. 800, I think, is everything that they possibly can give you, right? And to me, what's that thing that you don't want, right? To me, you're going to get it all. And when you're really are wondering if you're on a long cross country, the weather's going to change. So you really want to know what's that long range thing happening out there, and to be able to go to METARs farther away. And the MX200 does a really neat thing. It tells you, give me the weather at my destination airport. That's what the default is. So when you press that button, it'll give you the destination where you're heading. And then you can tell it to give me the weather below me in my nearest airport. So you can actually flip to that switch. So you're above, say, some clouds, and you're just wondering, hey, if the engine goes out, or if I have a problem and I need to land, what's below me? How bad is it? What's the deal? So it has some really neat strategic planning things within XM Weather that I really like. Now, on ForeFlight, you get the same bit of information by doing the dots, right? You can tell ForeFlight to show you the current METARs by the color codes, so you can see that they're green or they're blue, and what's the status of that, which is not bad. Like I said originally, my personal preference is to have them both. Could I save $800? Yes. Would I want that $800 back if I really got into a situation that I really wish I could get XM Weather, because it's smoother? To me, it's easier to read, and it's in my face. I like that. I just like it. To me, it's well worth it. If I'm on 3 trips a year where I really want to use weather, I'd rather pay the $800 for it. It's all relative to what's $800 worth to you, but to that, it is. I think you had said flying experience. Like I said, when we were flying in the old days of the company having to be, to a lot of places at a lot of times, I would fly into some. I mean, we'd go to Breckenridge on a regular basis. I'd go to flying in the mountains, flying down south where I'm at. Highest thing out here is about 150 foot. So it's a different kind of flying, but for work trips, I used to take a co-pilot at one time. He finally died. But when I go to fly into the mountains, just to change the subject for a second, I fly on the airways. I'm not a mountain flyer. I don't know a dadgum thing about it, but I know that my plane, if I take it up to 18,000 feet, I'm flying on the airway, and the airway says, you need to be above 10. I'm probably not going to hit anything. And to me, that's just the way to do it. I don't care if it costs me an extra 10 minutes or 20 minutes at that point, that I know for a fact I don't have to worry about hitting the mountain, right? So I just pick an airway, fly out on the airway. When I get to the point where I need to bail off the airway, I bail off the airway. It's probably not the most efficient way to get there, and it's not going to be the fastest, but for a flatlander like me, flying in the mountains it doesn't need to be an experiment. Those people laid out those airways because they knew what they were doing, and if I fly on them, they guarantee me I'm not going to hit anything. That sounds like a good option to me. So that's kind of the way I do that. And then I always land with too much fuel. That's me. When I land my airplane, I'm always wanting to have at least a minimum of about 50 gallons of fuel, probably down to maybe 40, 20 aside. Because number one, you can't trust your fuel gauges, right? They're just, the only thing they got to read accurate is 0. And I'm not worried about that being accurate. So I don't want to land with less than about 40 gallons of fuel on board, just because I feel better at it. So if I had to go somewhere else, or if the runway was, somebody landed bad and runway's closed, I got a place, plenty of fuel to go find another option. So I try to do that as safely as I can. And don't make it, I want you to absolutely know that I'm not surely not trying to talk down to anybody on the thing. I'm not the best pilot. I'm trying to be the safest pilot. I want you to try to be the safest pilot. So things that I don't know. I know things maybe you don't know, but the idea is to get the information out there so you can feel like the safest pilot. Just like y'all's comments when you say, Monty, you shouldn't be using that for strategic planning. Absolutely, I agree with you 200%. I don't. I really, really don't. The tops on accurate, not that accurate, not to rely on it. Somebody said that they're not that accurate. It's good just to know that. So I've called or looked on the screen, looked on flight planning, and they say the expected tops is 18,000 feet. And what I'll do here is, we live in a small town. I actually can call the airport, the tower at the airport. So I'll actually, if I really want to go somewhere and the weather's got bases that say 2,000 feet, but you don't know what the tops are, but they look high, I actually call the tower and say, hey, they know me. I mean, I fly out of there pretty regular, and say, hey, can you get somebody to give me a tops report on the way in? So they will. They'll get a commercial airliner coming in and say, give us a tops report. So then they'll call me back, or they can say, call back in about 15 minutes. We'll tell you, and call back. And I tell you, that's a warm feeling, is when you're staring up at the clouds and you don't really know where the solid tops are, and you can get a real person that just came down through and says, oh, top's 4,200. So if you know the bases are 2,000, the tops are 4,200, to me, that's an absolute perfect scenario for a comfortable I-4 pilot. You know, you got 2,000 foot of clouds. You people flying, you know, turbines are going to go through that in literally 2 minutes, and I'm going to spend about 5 in the clouds. But so what? After 5 minutes, I'm on top, I'm down the road. It's just a great feeling.
Monty, I have a question for you. We mentioned training at the start of this webinar, and let's talk a bit about how you learned to use these systems for flight with XM, or excuse me, with ADS-B, and then the XM on your MX200. Was this on the flight training, as it were? Did you go through any kind of structured training program? How did you approach learning how to use these different systems?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I came out of a Lance, which really had no weather on board. They were just coming out with those before the ForeFlight one had that one. They had that other one that you put in the window. It was a little bigger than a cigarette case. I never really bought one of those weather things. So my Lance had a 530, 430 and no weather really at all. But then when I got the Malibu, it came with the GDL 69 on the 530, which I thought was great, because the first time I went to go training on my Malibu, I thought, wow, this is cool. You can actually see rain. And of course, after your instructor needs to be dropped off in New Orleans, you're flying down there, and you know the weather's kind of raining, and you get to see the weather on board on the 530, which you thought was cool as can be because you've never seen it before. But anyway, so I got introduced with it when I bought the Malibu, and like I mentioned earlier, I bought the Malibu just strictly for the flight director. I just thought, you know, having another set of eyes to help me fly the airplane is a great thing to have. I use the autopilot to shoot approaches, and I'm going to say about 1 out of about 8 times. Not because the autopilot's not good, not because I want Monty to be proficient, but I do want to test it. So about every, 8 or so times, I'll actually let the autopilot go ahead and grab the plane and send it down, because I want to make sure it works. I'll let it use it sometimes just to make sure it's tracking and doing its job. But realistically, you want to know rule number 1 is you can fly the plane. When all this stuff goes to pot, you can actually fly the plane. And that's what I always want. I hand fly the plane up to altitude, and I hand fly the plane generally down from altitude, because I want to make sure I can stably run the plane. Just like the other day when the window blew out. We've trained for that. I've done training with people. I've done training at SimCom. I've done training in true simulators. So all that training, when the window instantly blows out and you're not expecting it at all, and all of a sudden you're at 15,000 feet, you got to get down to get oxygen. It's 20 degrees outside. You're doing 200 something knots. The wind's howling inside the plane. You're able to just pull your chair up, not maybe that stable, but pull your chair up, realize this is not your dreaming, and pull the power back and get the plane down below 12,000 feet and declare an emergency. All that's because of training, right? If I had never done this in training and it was the first time, it could have been a big shock event for everybody in the plane, right? But once I got to 12,000 leveled out, and my girlfriend realized, hey, we're not really crashing. He's just kind of get us some air, and comes up to the front and asks me, what can she do? And I said, take a picture of the window gone. I may have to explain it to somebody later on. You realize that training is a very important piece of it. I mean, take it serious, learn it, because that one day you really may end up having to do something that you got trained on. Somebody was saying that they got better GPS weather planning tools. They do. There are a whole lot more that's out there now than what used to be. Some of them we actually saw. I did go to the PMOPA thing the other day in Vero Beach, and they had some people there showing some new ADS-B weather tools and GPS weather tools. So there are a lot more out there that do that. If you got the time to spend to go look at them, they may very possibly be worth it. It may be something you want to send into our magazine, Lee, that we could write an article on some of the other tools out there. I have seen those in like Flying Magazine and stuff, and I try to remember what they are. But yes, there are some very good tools out there for strategic planning on ADS-B. Good question. So did I answer your question?
Any advice?
I'm sorry.
I was just going to build on Lee's question, Monty. Any advice you have with bringing these tools into initial or recurrent training to make sure that you're up to speed on using these weather tools?
Yeah, my take on that really is, so like I bought these 275s, right? And now I'm an old Mirage that had just plain old steam gauges, thing. It did have a flight director. So when I bought the 275s, in the back of our magazine is always those people in Vero Beach that do flight training. Shame on me for not remembering them right off. but they advertise, they show the little M600 with the fancy G3000. But I called them up on the phone. I said, is there any chance y'all have like a 275 I could come down there and get trained on? Because I just bought them and I've got to go to reoccurring training, and I really like to have somebody that can help me with the 275s and make sure I know what I'm doing. And what they said is they had 275s in the G600, the M600's simulator, that they could come down and let me do that. So I did that. So I flew down there and I spent the day, flying the M600, which is a whole lot of airplane. I mean, it's a wonderful piece of equipment, but it did let me do approaches and stuff using the 275s, just to answer your question. And then vice versa, when I went to training last time, the last one after that one was I went to Sarasota and got trained on the 375. So I had the 375 in the plane and I'd used it for a while, but there's a lot of things it can do, holdings and things that. So I met with an instructor, Al Louie at the time, and said, how good can you help me with the 375? I just want to make sure I'm proficient. It does a lot of great stuff. It's a wonderful piece of equipment. So like I fly into Addison and Dallas and Fort Worth the other day, and I do arrivals and departures on that 375, which I'm sure if y'all are G1000 people and that kind of stuff, that you're used to just having your instrumentation just take care of you on the airway and everything. But it's really nice to be able to set up your flight plan out and just say, yeah, I'm doing this departure, I'm going to this, it's going to be this, leaving at this intersection. It's just a wonderful thing to be able to dial in a couple of pushes of the button and away you go. So my answer to your question is yes. Anything you put in your plane that's new to you, get a professional to walk you through it, because it may be, especially if it's like the 275, it's a life or death piece of equipment to know how to work, right? If you don't know how to work your attitude indicator, you got a real problem on your hands. So always, like I said, always caution on the side of safety, period. If you feel a little unsafe about it, go meet some other pilot and sit down. We have a new Mirage that got bought. It's a doctor out of Natchitoches, where I just flew to yesterday. And first thing he did was say, Monty, I want you to come down and fly with me in the plane. His instructor had just left, and he wanted me to sit with him in the plane and watch him fly a few times. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's a great community. Not that I'm a great pilot. I'm definitely not an instructor, but I know how the plane's supposed to act, right? He's flying basically the same model I have. It's called giving back. That's the whole goal, because we all want to give back and make everybody be as safe as they can.
Indeed. And I think that's a good note to leave it on, Monty. Just to let everyone know, this webinar was recorded and will be on the PMOPA website within, I believe, the next day or two. So be sure to look out for that. If you do have any additional questions that we didn't get to in the chat today, you're welcome to email those to me at editor@pmopa.com. I'll be sure to get those over to Monty, and we'll connect you folks that way. And with that, Monty, thank you very much for taking the time to organize this presentation and speak with the PMOPA membership about this topic on using these advanced tools for weather forecasting.
Thank y'all. It's my honor to get to talk to y'all. And like I said, I just want us all to be safe. I hate the last publication of the article. We all have to go look at what crashes happened over the year. And I'm just wanting everybody to have a really, really good time flying their planes, enjoy life. And it's just a wonderful way to get to live. And I really appreciate it every day I get to do it. So thank you.
Indeed. Monty, thank you. Thank everyone again for taking the time to watch this webinar today. And everyone have a great rest of your week. Thanks again.
Thank you, Rob. Take care. Bye-bye.